Good evening, everyone. My name is Sophie Lieberman. I'm the Head of Programs at Sydney Living Museums and one of the members of the SAMAG committee. And I'm very happy to be able to welcome you here this evening to our session. As we begin, I'd like to acknowledge the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation on whose land we meet and pay my respects to their elders, past and present. We've had a lot of fun putting this session together tonight, beyond pale mell and stale, embedding diversity in the arts. This began with a question about what was the role of quotas in the arts and has evolved into the fantastic panel that you can see here before you. And I'll hand over to Penny Miles, our chair, in just a moment. Just quickly, I'd like to acknowledge the work that Morwenna Collette, there she is, who's co-convened this with me, has put into it, and also the support that we receive from Arts New South Wales and also the Australia Council, as well as this group here, Keeping Company, who make these SAMAG seminars possible. So I don't think I need to introduce Penny. She's got a long background in varying roles around diversity in the arts. And she's going to lead a very short discussion, and hopefully it will become more and more participatory as we go on. And we really will be welcoming audience input, yes, relevant audience input. But before I hand over, just quickly, do remember the SAMAG hashtag if you are twittering or following us on Instagram, which is SAMAG_2015. So without further ado, please welcome the panel, and I'll hand over to Penny. Thanks, Penny.
Thank you, Sophie. So Sophie said my name is Penny Miles. I'm currently the Manager of Cultural Engagement here at the Australia Council, which is a new role. I do have background, you can read my bio, that it has worked in different areas and different spaces in terms of diversity. And I guess one of the things in taking on this panel chairing role tonight was just a little bit of concern about how diverse can we actually be up here? We have to have a huge line of us really if we were going to cater to everything. And not only just thinking about what instantly comes to mind when you think of diversity, but maybe even art form or our experiences. So before we start, we acknowledge that there's probably, the whole sum of us in the room have got a lot of experience, so we really do want it to be a conversation. If something springs up, if you have a similar experience or you want to prompt with a question, feel free to do so. Just stick up your hand. Sophie's going to do the running on the mic, so no shouting without miking, but other than that, we're all good to go. So, I'll just quickly introduce our panel. So I have Lisa Havler here, Jenny Bissett, Lee Lewis, and Barley Patter. So just to start us off, I'm going to ask everyone just to set the scene a little bit. In case you haven't read the bios, you get a little bit more detail, and then we'll kick off with the conversation. So Lisa, can you tell us what you're currently doing in the space with diversity?
Sure. So I'm the director of Carriageworks, which is a contemporary multi-art centre which is located in Redfern. And our remit is really to reflect and engage with the culturally diverse communities of Sydney and New South Wales. So our starting point doesn't come from the point that we want to have a culturally diverse program, but our starting point for Carriageworks is context, location, cultural relevance. So it really starts with the fact that we're in Redfern. So we have a very strong and growing Aboriginal contemporary Aboriginal arts program, and we have an Aboriginal advisory board that works with us to implement that program. And we have a program where we work with artists from across Asia and the Pacific, and that includes bringing in international artists to work with communities and artists here in Sydney, but also increasingly, as we're developing partnerships with other organisations across Asia, increasingly we want to co-commission work and present work internationally as well. So I think one of the key things in that, in our culturally diverse program, it's very easy to develop a program that's culturally diverse, but I think some of the key challenges around a program such as this is ensuring that it's actually accessible to the communities that it's culturally relevant to. So that access, our access program includes all of our tickets are $35. We work hard and will start investing more into ensuring that that communities that the work is culturally relevant to know about the work. And also physical access to the work, transport, language, and really we work in establishing multi-year relationships with the communities, the culturally diverse communities that we work with, and that's a really critical thing, particularly working in this area is not dipping in and out of communities, but actually establishing longer-term relationships. So that's the sort of type of work that we're doing.
Jenny, Lisa talked about, being located in Redfern. Obviously, your work comes a lot from your location as well.
I was saying to Lisa earlier that there are a lot of similarities actually between the two organisations. Size is not one of them. And also size of remit is not one of them. So to a certain extent in Blacktown we're quite privileged because we are small, and we also don't have pressure on us to make a buck at the box office. Our performance studio seats 100 people, so we don't have that kind of pressure to make money. And our council, because we're a council-owned arts centre, doesn't put that pressure on us. So we're in quite a privileged position, I think, that we can actually really program to our communities, I suppose. To a certain extent in Blacktown, programming diversity is our only option. It's not a choice. We have, I've got the stats here about our communities, but we have one of the largest Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander populations in Australia, urban populations in Australia, and our first departure point, I suppose, for programming is acknowledging the traditional custodians of Blacktown, who are the Darug, and the many, many other nations, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander nations that are represented in Blacktown. And that's kind of like the first non-negotiable departure point for us for our programming, I suppose. We have, I have to report to council on our programming, and there's a particular councillor who, when I would present my report, would say to me, "Oh, well, that's all very nice and it's fantastic what you're doing for the Aborigines and for the ethnic people, but what about the ordinary Joe Blow in Blacktown?" And I couldn't actually take him to task in that forum, but I took him aside later and I said to him, "Councillor, who do you think is the average Joe Blow in Blacktown?" And he thought for a moment and he said, "Yes, you've got a point there." So the average Joe Blow is not who he grew up with in Blacktown. He's 90-something. The average Joe Blow is just as likely to be, a Josephine or a Joseph, but also could be from any range of different backgrounds. So my position in programming is we have no option but to program diversity, especially if we're talking about, and I'm talking specifically, I suppose, about ethnic diversity here, right through from acknowledging where our name comes from, Blacktown. The name Blacktown is based on the very sad beginnings of our city, which were when Macquarie established the Blacktown Native Institution in Blacktown, where children were removed from their families, and a lot of those children were relocated from Parramatta, and their families moved and camped around the institution, and it became known as the Blackstown. And that road became known as the Blackstown Road, and so that's why Blacktown's called Blacktown. So it's a very, very important part of our heritage that's acknowledged throughout our programming, and coming right through to our contemporary communities of refugees who have experienced significant trauma and the sort of experiences that they're having in resettling in Blacktown. So I won't go on too much. We're also privileged because we're not constrained by art form. So we're a multi-art centre as well. We're also privileged because we're such a small centre for such a large population that we can actually really, really focus on something, and what we focus on is new work. So that most of the work that we do is made at Blacktown and managed by our curatorial staff, using artists not just from Blacktown but from all over Australia. I might just shut up there.
Clearly, Jenny, you've got a few more things that we might come back and ask you, though. Lee, in continuing to set the scene, you want to talk about the work that you're doing in the diversity space at the moment?
I was struck by Jenny's phrase, not what's the non-negotiable, and I sit at the opposite end, to you, but similarly about 100 seats. As the artistic director of Griffin Theatre Company, the remit is to produce between 4 and 6 new Australian plays each year. And there's something deeply conservative about that, in that it's plays. So we don't have art form diversity. It's a very old structure of play. I've spent the year examining how we unpick that structure without destroying the beautiful thing that a play can be. Our company's built to accept written work, program written work, and turn that into performance. So if something can't come into me as a written play in that format, how can the company engage with it? So we're starting to really carefully unpick that idea of art form diversity. Look, the big question that I face is how do you make sure that the personal politics that you bring into a position can live beyond your tenure? Because so much of the conversation is driven by personal interest. So for me, the idea of making sure that there is a real company interest in widening the vision of the company to include various audiences and theatre makers, I'm very conscious it's fragile. And I do think it should be a vision of a company, not of individual people within a company. So that's what I'm dwelling with at the moment in the questions about diversity. How do you keep it wider? I've built over the course of the last few years for the company I would call them a group of silent outside eyes. Well, not silent, that would be wrong, but I don't talk about them normally. But people who I trust have a capacity to question the decisions that we make. And there are a lot of private conversations where I say, this is what we're thinking about, and I trust them to ask really rigorous questions about who, why, and what. And my question is, how do you make that part of the working process of a company? 4 to 5 new Australian plays. I think we will always be in the question of what is new and what is Australian. So how do you turn what seems to be a constraint into a mission? And I'd like to think that the artistic community that we have around the company is capable of moving ahead of legislation. It should be a vision question, not a legal question. It's a big conversation which I'm happy to be a part of, but I realise I'm a very small voice in what is an increasingly complex conversation, as I should be.
And someone who takes that conversation to people who might not be thinking about it. Varley, do you want to give us a little update on what you're doing?
Cool. I'm the token brown person on this panel. And the token male. I guess I'm beyond pale and stale. But,
You still could be stale.
I could still be stale. According to whom, Lee Lewis? So I'm a performing artist. I'm an actor. I'm a producer as well. So I've produced content that is, I guess, I don't know how it became diverse or why I picked it, but I started off by getting together with a bunch of mates who were part of the South Asian GLBTIQ community, and we just said, let's put on something for Mardi Gras, let's make it Bollywood and awesome, and everyone will love it. And then subsequently that did really well, and then I'm now producing the second one. We devise it from beginning. I produced also Hats Off this year for the first time for myself, which was a charity benefit concert for the AIDS, HIV and AIDS Council, and also the Bobby Goldsmith Foundation. So I have a strong connection with the GLBTIQ community. I also have a strong connection with the Indian community. Growing up, I grew up in Blacktown, so I know a lot of the things that Jenny spoke about applied to me. I represent a big section of the average Joe in Blacktown. I now am in the inner west, so I've now become this wanky inner west hipster thing. But I guess what we're doing, I'm also the co-chair of the Equity Diversity Committee. So for anyone that doesn't know, Equity is the Actors Equity is the union body for performers in Australia. And I'm the co-chair. I share the position with Pearl Tan, who's sitting in the second row over here. The Diversity Committee was brought about because this issue of diversity in the arts, this lack of representation in our Australian productions, has been an issue going on for a while. And whenever I bring it up, someone says, oh yeah, someone said that 20 years ago, or someone said that 10 years ago, or someone said that 40 years ago. And it's just like, freaking hell, then why aren't we doing something about it? And so the committee was established around the aims of, okay, let's actually get performers together that I guess identify as someone from a diverse background. So we cover cultural linguistic diversity, performers with a disability, women, age, GLBTIQ. I think that's it. Is that everything, Pearl? She's tweeting. So we cover all those different ranges, and then people come up to us and say, oh, but what about size, and what about this? And so I guess the conversation, how long is a piece of string, I guess, and that can also apply for diversity. So we, I guess as a committee, we get together and we come up with aims and objectives and campaigns. We're nowhere in a way that we could instill policy or demand. I guess we're not in a position to do that, but we're up for the conversation. So, and a big part of that conversation is include us. I remember in one of our first meetings, someone said, not about us, without us. So that's a big part of it. And I'm really grateful for being invited to speak today, because it is, if it was going to be this, it's just like, where's the brown person, or where's the colour? And I have been to those panels where I've seen, and I've just gone, far out. Okay, let me stand up and ask the really rigorous questions here. So that's a big thing. Now, part of our, I guess, what are the campaigns that we've got coming up? We're devising a campaign with the Writers Guild of Australia and the Playwriting Australia around playwrights sort of coming on board to pledge to diversity in the works that they create, and also in the stages of their influence of, their limited influence in the casting process, I guess. And also our industry is sort of, I guess, you might say, under attack. The federal government is trying to remove the restrictions or the requirements around importing foreign artists on Australian taxpayer-funded films and TV productions. So a big part of that campaign will also be about diversity, because there are certain aspects to the current process in place that requires, for example, there's a film being made with Indian Australian characters in it. They have to demonstrate that they have searched all through Australia to try to find the right people to play this role, and therefore they can't, so they will import an international performer for that. A big plus for that is, and so the government is trying to get rid of that and just bring in anyone you want, whatever, we don't care, we don't want this red tape. But what we're fighting for is the opportunity to be seen. So through those requirements, we are given, so performers like myself are given the opportunity to be seen in the audition room, to develop the skills, to do better at auditions, and then subsequently demonstrate our ability to work. And therefore, yes, okay, great, bring Dev Patel over if you want. But, but at least we're being seen. So that's also a big campaign that we'll be working on over the next couple of weeks. Yeah.
It's really interesting just listening to you all talk. We've got, from Jenny saying it's not about a choice at all. We just have to. Lee, how do I actually get my organisation to get into that mindset? And then you're thinking, Bali, there are these tools that you can use to sometimes push people, for the other end of the spectrum. Thinking about all of that, Lisa, in your experiences with your organisation, what opportunities or obstacles have you had to kind of bring everybody up to speed on what you want to achieve, your vision?
In terms of diversity?
Yeah.
There hasn't really been obstacles. I think it's just ensuring that when you're bringing in culturally diverse work or presenting culturally diverse work, that the right support structures are around that work, and that the artists are connected to their community if that's required, and that you're bringing the audiences to them So it's actually, you know, a meaningful engagement and has a reason. So I think it's a different way of working in a sense, but we don't only apply that way of working to our culturally diverse work, we apply that way of working to all of our work. So I think it's a culture that's worthwhile across the board.
Yep. And in terms of organisations, I should say at any point if you guys have got questions, you can jump in. Now we've done the formal little context bit, so just do a little wave and we'll get the mic out to you. In terms of opportunities at the moment, what is needed in terms of leadership? I mean, you guys all sound very strong in your visioning. What support, what is needed right across the arts in terms of leadership? Is there something missing that we should be all tapping into?
Thinking outside the box, really, and taking risks. The trouble is that there's this question of the bottom line, and of course, arts is also a business, and so I completely agree with that. Becoming a producer, I was just going, oh my God, there's budgets and stuff, I've got to make money. I was like, can't just put on art. But the problem is that, not the problem, the thing it requires is risk-taking, but appropriate risk-taking, understanding what the risks are, the measures that you can take, leadership around it, so bold leadership, some courage, and be willing to weather mistakes that are made in the process, and also talk to diverse communities, ask them what they want. And I personally think that some sort of governance, like policy or something put in place, you know, for example, the British Film Institute have instigated or instilled this policy called, I guess it's the 3 ticks system. So if you were to apply for government funding for a film in the UK, is that you have to actually satisfy, there might be about 10 different tick boxes. You have to satisfy at least 3 of those that will cover an aspect of diversity. Otherwise you won't get funded.
I also think one of the big issues is pathways for artists, culturally diverse artists into the arts. And I think, you know, tertiary education is expensive, it's hard, and, you know, there's not, if you have advantage, if you have social advantage, it's a much easier pathway. And I think we need to try and look at access into secondary and tertiary education and pathways, professional pathways into the arts to really, it's not just about the programming, it's about the education as well.
And if you live in Western Sydney, there is no creative arts education, tertiary education. University of Western Sydney got rid of all of theirs. They've got a small writing literature program, and that's about it.
Theatre Nepean was such a
good
What
program.
if I said the word boards to you? Does that make you think anything? Or?
boards.
Do you think we're getting that right or not really?
The elusive boards.
Look, I have a fabulous board that's very supportive of the vision for the company. They're a very white board. They're very conscious of that. And they're conscious of looking for people that they know that they can bring onto the board. I think the biggest thing for me is just being aware that when you're under time pressure, you will revert back to people you know. So how do you make sure the circle of people you know is just much wider, so that under pressure, the people you can call on straight away are not reflecting your own cultural circle. So. Yeah, so it's the ongoing process of that, and I've got that same question for the board of like increase the circle of friends that you have. So that's again pushing it into the personal space and out of the legislative space.
I don't think it's actually acceptable anymore to not have a culturally diverse board or be planning to have a culturally diverse board.
And I think that there is a role for policy making and for funding bodies, and not just the public sector funding bodies. It was really interesting for me going through the process of applying for funding from Crown Resorts Foundation, because they can fund whatever they like. And it doesn't matter how Australian or un-Australian or diverse or monocultural your program is, they can just fund whatever they like. But which I found quite confronting. And I'm used to working with government funding bodies, and I actually think that the Australia Council on Arts New South Wales actually need to be much more hardline than they are, and I'll probably never get to go on an assessment panel again. and what I've observed in that assessment process is that you're asked to provide all this information about diversity or access and equity, but actually it doesn't impact that much on the funding decision. And my feeling is that if you are asked what you're doing with Indigenous artists or Indigenous communities, you must answer the question, otherwise you just don't get through. Now the question might be nothing because, and our intention is to, but to just not address it. I just can't get how anybody can access funding if they're not addressing that. Anyway. Yep. And the other thing, which has been useful for me in local government is my board is the council. They're elected by the people. They are predominantly, out of 15, there are 2 women. Out of 15, there are 3 people from non-Anglo-Australian backgrounds, and out of 15 there are probably 2 under 60, 3 under 60. So it's not it does not represent Blacktown, our council, at all. And the only way sometimes I've been able to push when I've been under the hammer and had pressure to program particular kinds of things that I don't think are appropriate, I've been able to call on the funding bodies, not literally, but say, look, we're funded to do this kind of thing. If we don't actually do it, we're going to lose our state government funding. And so I've been able to use that just because it says in the funding guidelines that that's what we're funded to do.
Before I throw open to you guys to see if there's any questions, Jenny, you've been doing this for a while. You know, when you paint the scene like that of what your context and the environment you're working with, when I think about it from an organisational point of view, what tips have you got for actually staying motivated? How do you not get fatigue in that environment?
I do get fatigue. I'm very tired.
Someone get the lady a coffee. Espresso.
What keeps the drive going for you?
Look, what keeps the drive going for me is my own personal commitments to social justice, and that's why I keep doing it. And because I have an amazing staff who produce incredibly exciting, relevant, cutting-edge programming of excellence.
Yeah. Lisa?
Yeah, I think it's where the best, most interesting work is. Yeah.
Lee?
Yeah, that.
Yeah.
No, it is. It's absolutely the future of storytelling. I mean, there's no story to tell if you're not engaged in the stories of the people of the city that you live in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Bali?
I don't have anything to add to that, but exactly what everyone just said there. But also going back to the point about the lack of education and you know, opportunities or decreased opportunities for people from those backgrounds. As a person of Indian migrant background, so I was born in Blacktown, but my parents migrated from India, and I wasn't allowed to choose music as an elected subject because it was about, no, where are you going to get, how are you going to get into computers and IT if you do music? And so therefore,
Right.
Yeah, I know. And pardon?
We're going to get you back.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, you should have me.
Yeah, we will.
Let's talk.
Yeah.
Let's talk. And so I went on and did an IT diploma, studied multimedia and web design, and then got to eventually going, no, arts is what I want to do, and I love, look at this, I'm on a stage with a microphone talking about myself. I freaking love this. Freaking love it. And but the trouble is that you can, and this is the trouble that I'm having with the work that I'm devising or programming myself, is that we go to the community and we're like, all right, I want to put on this awesome show and this is what's going to happen, and I need someone to be able to dance like this and do 29 Kathak twirls across the room, but then I need them to emote and give. They just don't have the skills, and so we end up with this sort of, you know, community, like at the church hall sort of production, which is incredibly frustrating when you're a perfectionist like me. And so, but the trouble is that people aren't aren't given those pathways or those opportunities from a cultural perspective and a traditional perspective. And until, I guess, what arts companies can do is like what, the rise of Indigenous arts has happened, is that they've gone specifically to the communities and gone, okay, you've got stories to tell, so what are they and what are your methods? And let us work with you, so here's our stage, here are our expertise, like everything, have our resources, and we'll make your stories come alive on the stage. Which is really great. We're doing that for Indigenous content, and we've got that for all the white content. Yep, don't even need to do anything with that. But then there's this grey area of there's everything else. There's mixed race, there's Indian, there's Asian, there's, all this other area that isn't being tapped into. And I am noticing a lot this talk of, but there's heaps of Indigenous content out there. We're doing diversity. It's just like, yeah, but there's more, there's even more amongst that as well. And then there's diversity amongst the Indigenous communities. And then there's diversity amongst, where are they from, and all the different, all the different areas of Australia that they're from. So in order to address that there's no pathway to education. Yes, it costs a shitload of money to go to uni or whatever, and my parents would not have I didn't go to drama school, I just had to do this out of my own bat. So, they won't front up the money for that sort of stuff. But I guess what arts organisations can do, and companies, is reach out to those communities, go to schools and go, all right, let's devise a program with you so that they can be interested and see that there is a future in that.
Yeah. And it's interesting too, I guess it goes back to Jenny's point, just taking off any hint of an Australia Council hat for a moment. But, that whole notion of almost having programming by boxes, and when you start to do that, the boxes don't carry enough. There's just too many. It's not about kind of actually having, this is my April show and it will be.
Yeah.
Yeah. Are there any questions from the floor at this point? Any stories that you need? Steph? Just
kick them off.
Run all the way across the room. I was interested when Sophie said that this panel started from a discussion around quotas. The programmers that are on the stage, you've obviously chosen them because they do program diverse work and they have an interest in that. That's not always the case. So do you think there should be quotas, and what should the quotas be about in terms of diversity?
Lee?
Yes.
You looked at me first.
Yes,
Yeah, go for
I
it.
have no fear of quotas. If you're doing the work, you're sitting right in quota land anyway, because actually you're trying to balance everything and you're trying to represent people. I'd like to think that the organisations can be ahead of quotas, that you sit in a room with people and go, we're doing that, we're doing this, so that actually people are working on it, as opposed to, oh God, how am I going to do that? But if that's what it takes to move things along, because I'm not going to wait for natural evolution. That would be, was it 300 years from now? I might be.
Jenny? She's thinking.
You say something, Lisa. You've got something.
If you are taking government money, then you have to do it.
But quotas, how you calculate the quotas is a question. Because if you calculate according to population, it ain't going to work. You've got to calculate quotas for affirmative action using old-fashioned EEO language.
But I think there's criteria within funding that's around, diversity and access and all of those things. And there's assessment made on whether you're doing that or not. So I think government is wielding a stick around that, as they should be.
Yeah, but it doesn't. I think quotas can be too complicated.
Yeah. I think you're talking about quotas in the performing arts sense, but I think there's across the board.
See, I set myself a target of 25% of our programming is Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander programming. Our population is 2.7%. I just set that as a target because I like to set a bar. It's completely pulled out of my brain. But that gives us something to to head for, but it's completely made up. Like it's not scientific
Because
at all.
there can be a danger that the quota even just sounds like status quo in a way.
Yes.
That it's just the tick, it's just the done. But you're talking about it being more a target and a goal.
Yeah. I think it's and your personal. Again back to that personal value system. As soon as I have an all-white cast standing on a Griffin stage, I feel a sense of personal failure. It doesn't matter how good the play is. I just kind of go, I want it to be a normal experience all the time. And I just go, so, I don't put that feeling of failure onto company, but I wear it personally, and I kind of go, okay, what conversation didn't I have? Who wasn't I thinking about? All of that sort of stuff, and how did I not lead a team towards decisions that I would really like to see?
And I think we've had some debate within our membership at Equity and the Diversity Committee where people say, no, I don't want to get the work because they have to tick a box. I want to get the work because I earned and deserve that.
Get the work.
I know.
Do a good job.
I know.
Do a good job, you get the next job.
Exactly.
That's how it's like.
I'm all for quotas. My take on it is that at the moment, diverse content is not normal. Like, we actually have to have a panel discussion about diverse content.
Yeah.
Like, wouldn't it be interesting if we had to have a panel discussion on white content? What I would like to see, and what my philosophy or take on quotas is that let's build quotas into the system, whatever form they may take. And yes, it's going to be complex, because you're going to go for one company, it's going to be a particular method, and another one is going to be completely else. And government funds, definitely. And let's instill those quotas. And leading producers like Tony Ayres from Matchbox Pictures is all for quotas, and Tim Roseman from Playwriting Australia, as well, vocal advocates for diversity and quotas. And the thing is, let's put the quotas in place so people are forced to see this, so that it becomes normal for them to see this, and they don't go, oh, look, I'm watching this show. Oh my God, there was a brown dude on there. Or there was a lesbian on there.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, let's desensitize them to us being different, because we're not.
What do you reckon, Steph? Is that an answer?
It is. The other diversity that perhaps, I've seen it sort of coming through government funding, but not so much on stage, is disabilities. I think, Back to Back, that was at Carriage Works, it was the best show I saw all last year, but you very rarely see somebody with a disability on stage.
Exactly. And there's a problem, because a lot of our stages don't have the accessibility requirements. And so where's your disability action plan? We've devised a campaign as well, which we'll be doing for theatre companies through the Equity Diversity Committee, where we'll actually have a performance showcase day for disabled performers. So similar to where a theatre company such as Griffin would do an open general audition, you submit your details, I'll invite you in for a 15-minute session and deliver your monologue. The trouble that we've noticed, and our deputy chair is a person who is in a wheelchair. Her name's Kate Hood, and she's fantastic. She's down in Melbourne, and it's always about the disability, waving the disability flag. And we said to her, when she spoke on a panel that we had about diversity in the arts for our Equity 75th anniversary, she said she used to be a performer without a disability, and she was getting constant work. As soon as she could no longer live without a wheelchair, the door just closed. And there was no opportunity to be seen because of that. And so our focus on this Disability Performance Showcase Day is that we'll invite theatre companies to come and watch disabled performers put on really great work that they're capable of. And yes, Amanda from Glass Menagerie could actually be wheelchair bound. No, who's to say she's not?
Question down the front to make Sophie run.
Maybe you should just plant yourself. Just throw it.
Winner.
Thanks, everyone. This has been such an exciting start to the evening. I just wanted to pick up on something that Lisa mentioned before about why she programs this work, and it's because it's good, and it's where the good stuff is. And I think a lot of artists in this space are, as Bali was saying earlier, artists that are up for experimenting, taking a risk, that sort of thing. one of the excuses that I hear in terms of people not programming work in this space or not having people in their workplaces is quality. So I wondered if you wanted to address the question of quality in some way and what that can mean in this space, and why that's something that gets talked about.
What do you specifically about? What about
Quality
quality?
of the work?
The
Quality
quality
of the
of the
work.
work. Yeah,
I think
which
that really, I think some of that comes from when people talk about culturally diverse work, they also talk about community engagement and those types of processes. And I think sometimes when the word is community is used, it's read as not professional or not connected to excellence. And I think what community engagement can do in those processes around making work actually provides a context and an excellence around the work that isn't there when those processes haven't been in place for making the work. So I actually think the opposite, but I think that language comes from that community engagement, I think.
I was having a conversation about this seminar with my staff, and all of whom except one are from what would be called culturally diverse backgrounds. And I asked them how it is we got that way, and because I didn't go out looking for them because of where they were born, and I just think that's bullshit. It's absolute bullshit. I have the most I don't know anybody there aren't a lot of people in this room who've seen our programming at Blacktown, but anyone who has will know that the staff at our centre produce the most amazing, high quality work, and we only ever hire artists who are good, and we wouldn't. I mean, it's our responsibility to do that. And one of my staff members said, he said, one of my brown staff members said, nobody gets a job here just because they're brown. They have to be good. And I was just thinking about our upcoming programming, and there's not one white person that we've hired for our next 3 major projects, and that's not because we tried to do that. Do you know what I mean? Like, I just don't think it's that hard. But as I said, we're in a privileged position. We make new work. So we can, from the very beginning, we're starting from principles of, telling the real Australian stories.
So if it's not good, you've only got yourselves to blame. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting. I think it'd be a really interesting question if we were to almost have a debate with those who are the naysayers. And one of the things we were talking about the other day is the programmers who don't go into that space, who actually might even believe it's good work, but then get scared of the space when they think they have to sell it and how they're actually going to communicate. And I think you guys all tapped into that sense of community as well, but in the positive way of actually going out and talking to people and saying, is this what you want to see?
It's interesting though, that thing, excellence is a really old-fashioned useful word for exclusion. And as soon as someone wields the excellence word, it just should be a red flag for who you're trying to keep out of here. And I just think as soon as I hear that, I kind of go, who do you not want to engage with? And I just think it should be a red flag which people should be really wary of using, because there are layers of people that hear it that way. And yeah.
Yep, definitely. Question down the front.
Quality is also in the experience, though, especially when you're talking about arts. Sorry to pause you there. I just went back to the first show that I produced, which was a Bollywood-inspired musical play based on GLBTIQ themes. And so, you can't get an Indian guy out of Blacktown to dress up as a Bollywood queen on a stage. So we had a very small pool of people to choose from who weren't necessarily the best performers. But I actually sat them all down and I said, my goal is that you all leave, after closing night, you will look at yourself and not recognise who you are. So you will leave this experience not knowing who you are. And then I asked them, so then what will that take? What will you need to achieve individually? And someone said, well, I was 5 years old, my mum took me out on a stage on Bangladesh in front of 2,000 people. I froze in the middle of a dance performance. She walked out and slapped me in the face and dragged me off the stage. So I haven't been able to perform on a stage ever since. So there have been things like that. And so quality is also in the experience. And yes, I had first-time performers, never performed on a stage, doing drag, dressing as women, you know, doing these amazing things. And we had sell-out shows. And, you know, I was actually able to pay them. I gave them money. So I think that quality is quite a subject, like, you know, an interesting term to go, well, what does that mean for each individual?
And you said something really on earlier tonight about even the opportunity to be in rehearsal rooms, to practice your craft. You know, there's a bit of a responsibility if it isn't quality then on what are the opportunities and access.
Yeah.
Question?
Just on the notion of quality, expanding upon that and in a sense maybe beyond community practice, what Lisa was talking about, do you think it's also about aesthetic?
Yes.
As an excuse to not program?
Yes.
And that if it's professional practice and it's very, very good, that it may be about aesthetic and a lack of understanding around potentially what's happening within a culturally diverse practice that may not be understood or in the framing of it. Anybody?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of yeses going on here. And it's not only also again, that we're doing some work at the Australia Council at the moment in terms of looking at audiences and who are the people who are doing the selling. Do they even get the aesthetic? Are they actually of the same voice? Are they, you know, there's a whole stack of stuff going on there.
But again, it's about having a conversation with the community. Like we had, in a meeting that we had with Playwriting Australia, they said, you know, we don't want to step on toes. We don't want to tell these communities how to do it. And it's just like, what? No, we just want to be included. We want to be in the conversation. We want you to ask us, hey, is there anything that you want to do? Here's our expertise. Can we match something together and pull something off? I think that's I think that's a false hindrance. I don't think, you know, if we were to put it down to something like the aesthetics, I think we just got to go, let's have a conversation, ask some questions. Well,
yeah, because it's such you've got to be really willing to deconstruct your own taste and say,
totally.
you know, so be willing to be in that place and go and brave enough to program work which you actually genuinely doesn't sit within your own knowledge of.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, there are some very conventional plays. I can sit there and look and go, that's a really excellent example of this. Sometimes there's going to be work politically and aesthetically which is way outside my ability to judge it, which is important, but you've got to go forward, you know, positively and carefully and like you be, I suppose, that question of courage that you said, that thing, but also of consultation, courage and consultation. I think that those are, how do you move it forward? It's courage and consultation, finding people to talk to who you do trust, who say, no, that is good. And I go, okay, right, I'm going to trust you on that. I don't have to...
Talking to the artist.
So, yeah.
Get more understanding behind the practice.
Yeah.
So it's interesting listening to you guys. I mean, it's really easy. They're accomplishing. I know that we think that there's a long way to go on the journey, but has there ever been a time that you've been scared to walk into the space? Do you want to just give us a little bit? I mean, it's really easy when you're actually doing, but you know, at that moment before going in there.
Well, as a performer, it's a massive. There's a massive fear because you're, as a performer, as an actor, feel like you're giving away your power most of the time in your professional life. So there's this. You know, when you go into an audition, you want to be liked, you want to make sure you give a great performance and, you know, you don't piss them off. And, you know, there's the casting director, have you know, congratulated them on their last work. You know, there's all this stuff that you've got to have in place. And it will require, sometimes casting directors or, you know, producers or, you know, will go, screw you, you spoke out against something here and they don't want to speak to you. Like there is this fear with performers of doing that. And And I'm afraid of that as well. And I kind of sometimes tiptoe around and go, oh, so like, yeah, you were casting that film and great, thanks for seeing me. And oh, cool, you got Dev Patel, awesome. You know, oh, yeah, great that you were involved in that diversity talk and I really liked what you said. But rather I wanted to go, fuck you, why did you... You know, like I really would love to say that sort of stuff. But there is... I dare say, if you just speak to a lot of performers, there is this whole notion of giving away there's this sense that you have to give away your power in order to accomplish something, to achieve something. Yeah.
Lisa, fear of the programmer? Is there anything in there that you've
Fear of
had?
the
any moment as a programmer of being...
I think you should be scared all of the time. If you're not scared, there's something wrong. Yeah.
Any other questions from the floor, down the front?
I'm not sure if this is a question or a provocation at the moment.
Yes, provoke.
A lot of discussion around it about diversity in the arts has been coming from artists and the cultural sector. I've mentioned this before. What about soccer, for instance? What are they doing in that sector? How if you look at Jenny, I'm not sure whether you've witnessed as I have, just the rise of the Western Sydney Wanderers and the way they've
Of course.
engaged with their community, and it's like no one's coming along and gone, oh wow, soccer, that old English colonial sport, telling us how to engage with it. It's just been, there's a natural take up of that. So I'm just curious in terms of sourcing ideas and solutions and strategies beyond our own echo
But the way
chamber.
that they set up the Wanderers was best practice community engagement, because they went straight to the schools and they invested in those communities over a period of, I think it was even 6 years before they started the club, and they actually started that team. So it was beautiful the way that they did that, and no wonder they're succeeding, because they actually did invest in people properly.
Yeah, and they still are.
Yeah.
Soccer's the biggest sport in Blacktown. We've got a population of 320,000 now, and soccer is far and away the biggest sport, and it's grown since the Wanderers started intervening.
Propelling.
So when David Williams came to me and said, I want to make a work called Smurf in Wonderland, I was like, yeah, because if you're not actually engaged in that, there is a particular artist putting forward a work which connected to a larger Sydney conversation, and I go, that's a way in, and then formally, how do we find resources to support that? Because it's not coming into me as a play. So...
We had another question over here.
Identifying how did that work to go, okay, there was a significant period of consultation and investment in a particular community. Like, it's very rare that something's just come up out of the blue and you just go, oh, I've just invented the way to do something. You actually, a lot of stuff is created around something else that existed before and then was built upon that. So let's steal ideas from other industries. Let's do that.
And then we win the Asian Cup.
Yeah. I mean, it's
10 years from beating Uruguay to get into the World Cup. Just kind of going, there's been a really deep thought behind this.
So anyone that's interested in that, to go, okay, yeah, what happened with the Western Sydney Wanderers? How did they, that such a colonial white sport, or or even a European sport, now includes such diversity. So let's copy ideas.
My name's Cecilia Chmielewski, and I used to do your job. It's kind of curious for me to be hearing all of this again, but I just want to pick up your soccer story, because it is an example of significant change nationally in under a generation. And I think that's the thing we need to think about. And it was absolutely working with kids, breaking into the schools in terms of allowing or encouraging soccer to be played. And I think if you look at the trajectory of how soccer shifted, and it was at a national level, It wasn't just small little pockets everywhere. It happened very consistently. And I think to bear that in mind is something that the arts could really learn a lot from.
We shouldn't let soccer win, that's for sure.
No.
Any other questions? Sorry.
There's such a battle between sports versus arts, and it's just like, well.
Actually, I contest that. I think that maybe within the arts organisations we think that, but actually in families there's not.
No.
People are moving between like their sport involvement and what they want to go and see and do. So I find actually sport and art is very integrated in people's lives, just not in artists' lives.
It's not in the
people's
economy,
lives,
though.
yeah, and not in the economy, and not in a funding perspective or a coverage perspective, but. That actually could work very similarly and very hand in hand, as you mentioned. In a family, you are talking about sport, and then you are talking about a movie, and you are talking about a play, and you are talking about a concert, and then you're talking about the game. So,
Diversity of downtime. Yes.
Yes.
There's a question up the back.
Yes, thank you. I would like to know your thoughts about the role of major performing arts organizations, major cultural institutions that get heavily funded by, government, by private institutions in embedding diversity. What is the role? What are they doing to actually engage artists of culturally and linguistically diverse backgrounds in their programming, in their audiences, and in their leadership as well?
I think while the panel think about that, I think we even started by saying no one's doing it enough
are
at the
there
moment.
any? Yeah.
Well, actually, Malthouse.
Malthouse, there you go.
Yeah, Malthouse has been doing some quite extraordinary work in the last 2 to 3 years in the works that they've been putting on stage and the international collaborations that they've been doing. And for one of the major performing arts groups, companies to be doing that has been quite significant, and sitting in some of those conversations between companies, all the companies are acknowledging that work is extraordinary and that they are the only company that's really doing that.
Is it mostly international collaboration or is it local artists?
No, it's local artists as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really worth going back through their programs over the last couple of years to just see what they've put in place and how long it took them to do that. That was, I think Marion Potts was there for a good 3 years before she started to see works land in her program that were something that she'd intended from day one. So that would be some of the most interesting work.
I mean, there's some really interesting examples. Someone like Melbourne Theatre Company are also doing really strong areas in terms of regional and remote engagement. That's another area of diversity and access that we haven't talked about here today.
And their development program is very culturally diverse.
Very culturally diverse.
But pulling on the other end of the string, they are the most prominent places and they have the largest budgets to engage, and no, I don't think they're doing enough at all. Tell me if I'm wrong.
But I think that was the thing we were all saying beforehand. You can never do enough. If the minute you start going, I've achieved, maybe.
But we're seeing, because I'm looking for funding and grants at the moment.
Why is everyone hitting me up?
I'm doing my basic research now. Go, what are the grants available? And I'm actually seeing, I'm a resident of Marrickville Council, and they have a specific grant for engaging, an arts engagement community with their cultural, communities there. And then, Western Sydney is being given a lot of money recently with with arts funding out there, and I am starting to notice. Quick, I'll give you some links. I'm starting to notice that there are certain aspects of a lot of it is local government. Actually, they are interested in engaging the communities that they look after. So there are some out there, but if you're looking at the big main stage that do apply for federal and state, and they're not really doing much about it. But then you also got to look at who is their audience as well, and
their audience is some of the most sophisticated arts engagers on the planet.
Yeah.
A main stage audience in Sydney is not a Broadway audience, a West End audience insofar as a narrow vision. The range of work that they will engage with, I think there's more fear in the organisations than there is in the audience.
Can I just say to that, I don't know the answer as to what they're all doing. I think there should be no excuses for the major performing art companies. They get the government's investment in them is so extraordinary. But what I do notice is that some of those companies will come to us looking for partnerships, and I put partnerships in inverted commas. And I'm very wary of those partnerships because our experience has been that the partnerships, look, I'm being very cynical about this, that it's very easy then to tick a box about diverse audiences if there's been a partnership with Blacktown Arts Centre, because that's who our audiences are by default. They're culturally diverse. And I think that's very lazy.
I think it's, I suppose I would answer the question in another way, is that it is very unfortunate for any companies that aren't engaging in culturally diverse work or developing culturally diverse work, because they are becoming less and less relevant to the audiences and communities around them, and they're missing out on opportunities. So I think that that can only become more and more visible.
And it's bad for, I mean, it's got to become an issue because it's really bad for Australia, because those companies are the ones that purport to be the representatives of the Australian voice.
There was a question.
So I was just wondering, how do we measure success in this space? So how do we know that things are going to be improving?
God, that's a good question.
The Australia Council will collect amazing data.
Yeah. Yeah.
Our audiences are growing. Growing audience. I mean, again, it's that thing of who are you making work for? If that audience is growing, then that's how you measure success, because people are coming because they're finding a connection to work. So I think the audiences tell us when we're not doing the work.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that is very visible at Carriage Works, is that our audiences are younger and more culturally diverse because our work is more contemporary and more diverse. So you really see the reflection of your work in your audiences.
Back to the relevance again. Jenny, did you want to add anything in your bit?
A lot of our programming is culturally specific and is developed with particular communities over a long period of time. And I'll measure, the way I want to measure the success of our programming is when I see the Samoan community coming to something that the Indian and Pakistani community are programming at our centre. So when I start to see audiences crossing over, then I'll feel a sense of success. And when I see our Aboriginal communities coming to anything else we do that's actually doesn't include Aboriginal artists.
I think there was another question. You had a question? Yeah. Just, mic's on its way.
Thank you. So my question, it's not on. Hello.
Project.
Yeah, my question was really about the audience, because with so many target groups that councils and cultural organisations are looking to engage, in the first instance it's often about how to engage them as an audience. So it's often that extra next big step to then cross over to having that participation on the stage or on the walls. I suppose that's the key point there around how we can, through having that obligation, especially in terms of public institutions, around access and equity, that it's not just about having that audience participation, but audience as producers and creators.
Lee, do you want to talk about audience a little bit? You were talking before about it being one of your measures for success.
Yeah, it's interesting for me that in conversations with council about them looking for essentially audience on stage, that sort of participation, and again looking at an old art form in playwriting and the various levels of, I suppose, educational barriers that you have to actually navigate to get to the point of constructing a play that sits within what the old brief of the company was. And I don't know, I'm not very good at saying to audience, come and participate, because it's a professional enterprise. No, it is. You need to be, like, there's a lot of skill. And we have access points where things like something like the Griffin Award, where anyone can send a play in, and it gets very thoroughly and professionally read. We don't have the resources to feed back on that, so it's not necessarily a process that can improve the skill of individual writers, but when it comes to putting non-professionals on a professional stage, I think I'm not very good at navigating that at the moment.
I think that's easier when it's artist-led. When an artist is leading that process with the community or other participants, it's the result is always much better. You can't, as an institution that's supporting professional work and professional practice, it's hard to justify investment in community activity that isn't led by a professional artist. But there's ways that you can do that.
We do it together. We don't separate. Well, we do a bit.
Yeah.
But our artists are from our communities, not necessarily our geographical communities, but our artists are people that our communities recognise as being them.
So, for example, we're doing a project with a professional artist in a couple of months where we're bringing the Samoan police band to Sydney, and they're going to collaborate with a whole range of different community members in that performance. But it's the artist that's leading the excellence and the professional presentation of those community members in that work.
Does that answer your question? Yeah. I've probably got time for one more. Is that just a... Oh, yep, okay.
This is not really a question, it's just a comment and a bit of information from anybody who is interested. My name is Laura. I work for the Cultural Community or Cultural Performing Arts Network out of Form Dance Projects, which is funded by the Australia Council. We have the network, it's got a lot of, I've got a database of cultural performers who identify as culturally diverse. So this information is more for you as an artist, if you do identify as such, or as a programmer or director who want to engage an artist. So if you have a pen, your mobile phones, if you want to get in contact with me, it's Cultural Performing Arts Network at gmail.com is the email address. Or you can go to the website form.org.au and go into the industry or network, button that is there, and you will find information. You can join in through a online form. It's a Google form. You can take my phone number as well if you like, 04 041132 8063. I only, and this is due to lack of funding really, I only work one day a week, so it's only 7 hours where I have to get a newsletter together, I have to get in contact or try to get more performers to join the network, I have to try to get I get a lot of requests from events or in council actually, mostly council. Would
you be someone like a critical, what was it, the silent eye, but I can't remember what you called it, Lee. Yeah.
I don't have a good word for it yet.
Yeah. Yes, please do get in contact because my role is really to network, to network between performers and programmers, directors of venues who are looking for those culturally diverse performers. It is not that hard. Just contact me, and obviously if I don't have the answer or the specific cultural particular identity or whatever cultural aspect, I will try to get it for you or direct it to somebody who can help.
That was such a lovely segue to winding up because we'll do a bit of networking after this. Before I let you go, you might have seen on your seat that there's a little, looks like a little thought bubble. Yep, you got one of those? Okay. So you're not allowed to leave until you fill this in. And what we want you to do is we want you to just to put one idea, something that you're going to do, could be hopefully within the next week, that will actually make something happen and make a change in your organisation or in what you're doing on daily life in terms of diversity. What will you do? So we don't get to be or achieve anything without actually making something happen. Awareness is not enough. We need action. And we would love you to fill that in. Leave it up the back on the table. Is that right, guys? Yep. We'll take a bit of a snapshot picture. We might just send out some random ideas so we can all inspire each other. And I think that kind of whole notion that you were talking about of networking, broadening the voices, broadening your understanding, listening, authenticity and relevance have been some really lovely themes that keep coming through tonight. So I'll hand it over to Sophie. So thank you very much, guys.
Thank you, everybody, and please stay around and have a drink. Gold coin donation up the back. Chat with one another. Broaden your circles and your audience. Just a quick plug for the next seminar, which is in June, Creative Minds, Transformative Artistic Directorship, which will be part of the Vivid Ideas Festival, with another fantastic lineup of Rosie Dennis, Joanna Featherstone, Stephen Page and Ralph Myers, all talking about who should be leading our artistic vision in this country. So lots of food for thought, and indeed all of our panel members could easily participate in that conversation as well. If you could please join me in thanking them for their insight and their generosity. And we'll see you again soon.